You're now listening to Clive Mullings Talk with Substance on Hotline. Radio Jamaica, active for the good of our nation.
Okay, welcome back. Well, this morning we have joining us from Sygnus, Mr. Denzil Whyte, Vice President and Managing Director of Sygnus Advisory Ltd. Morning, Mr. Whyte, how are you?
Clive, it's such a pleasure to be here again. Thanks to you all and your listeners for having us this morning on Sygnus Tax 101.
Yes, and the pleasure is indeed ours. Sygnus is really creating waves, you know, and I would love to hear from you on this whole thing about the tax implications of management fees paid by companies in Barbados and St. Lucia to Jamaican residents for tax purposes. What is it all about in terms of the legislative changes?
Okay, so you're spot on when you talk about the legislative changes. But first, I'd like to say that Sygnus Tax Advisory Ltd currently provides tax consulting services to not only Jamaican companies, but companies that are investing in Barbados and St. Lucia.
Excellent.
And it's quite interesting time in Barbados and St. Lucia because their tax regime is undergoing changes as we speak.
Okay.
Let's start with St. Lucia in relation to the management fees being paid to non-residents.
Yes.
Prior to the legislative changes that you mentioned, an IBC or international business company would pay management fees to non-residents with no withholding tax.
Okay.
And so Jamaicans who are receiving management fees from a St. Lucian company would get 100% without suffering any tax.
Yes.
And there wouldn't be any further taxation in Jamaica. But now that has all changed. And the St. Lucian company is now required to withhold tax at 25%. However, that is reduced to 15% for a Jamaican company that is benefiting from the CARICOM double taxation treaty.
Yes. Okay, good.
In addition, IBCs incorporated prior to December 1, 2018 are allowed to make the payments without any withholding tax up to June 30 of this year, 2021.
Yes.
But after that, they have to start withholding the 15%.
Oh, it kicks in after that. Okay. Yes.
Yes. Right. Beyond just the withholding tax, though, it's important to note that there's a 10% restriction relative to other expenses within the St. Lucian company in relation to its ability to claim deductions in St. Lucia in arriving at its chargeable income there.
Yes.
So that is the St. Lucia side. So I can now move to the Barbados side.
Sure.
Barbados, unlike St. Lucia, they are no longer allowing IBCs.
Really?
But companies can actually pay management fees to non-residents with no withholding tax. So St. Lucia, 15% withholding tax to Jamaica and 25% to others. And Barbados would have no withholding tax. But in Barbados, the companies can't get any deductions for management fees paid to non-residents.
Oh, wow. Which is why it's so important to sit down with Sygnus, because, you know, these things are far-reaching changes and can have their own complexities, correct?
That's correct. That's correct, Clive. You know, for both St. Lucia and Barbados, they have traditionally been used as tax planning vehicles to hold companies, hold shares, hold assets, hold Jamaican assets in fact, and form management companies and other special purpose vehicles by persons, investors in Jamaica.
Yes.
Using those companies traditionally resulted in certain tax savings to their Jamaican owners.
Yes.
And now that the legislation in both of these countries have changed and is undergoing change, it is so important that these Jamaican owners reevaluate their positions with a view to assessing whether or not they are still maintaining those tax efficiencies that they sought after,
Yes.
or whether they need to reposition.
Yes. And what's important here, Denzil, is the information, because, these things will take place, but unless you sit with the experts to say, listen, this is when these things are going to kick in. These are the implications for you going forward. And just to highlight the point that everything is right with tax planning, yes? And so tax planning would also take into account changes. So it's best that they sit with you and say, what implications and what are some of the options that are out there, correct?
Absolutely. You just have to always be cognizant of the fact that the advice that you got yesterday was based on the legislative environment yesterday, and even your circumstances yesterday.
Yes.
But to the extent that your circumstances have changed,
Yes.
or the legislation has changed, there's always need to reevaluate. You need to ask yourself a question as an investor.
Yes.
When was the last time I reviewed the structure,
right,
and whether or not the tax planning that I am relying on now is still relevant?
Absolutely true. And the investor, because the serious investor would also be aware that when you have this kind of information, it empowers the investor and the company to make those changes, and may very require the kind of direction which wouldn't just come by reading a newspaper. Yes, because you have to now work out the nuts and bolts of it, correct?
Can I also add, though, Clive, that it would come from just listening to this program, because
true,
because the particulars of your own circumstance will not be considered necessarily here.
Yes, true.
Consider all of the fine print, because the devil is really in the details.
So very true. And what I'm happy about and with Sygnus is that, having highlighted some of these things, it helps now to alert person, say, listen, to make some concrete efforts now to see what is happening, and to come in and sit and make the appropriate planning. And you're quite right. There are different cases, different scenarios would have to be penciled out that only the one and one could really allow for.
Absolutely. Now, we said we're going to focus today on the management fees being paid out of Barbados or St. Lucia to a Jamaican company.
Yes.
And recall last week we spoke about directors' fees.
Yeah.
That previously was sheltered, but now it is no longer.
Yeah.
But just a recap in relation to the withholding tax and the implications of the management fees paid out of Barbados or St. Lucia.
Mm-hmm.
So with St. Lucia, the withholding tax on payments to Jamaica would be 15%, but with Barbados, coming out of Barbados to Jamaica, it would be 0%.
Mm-hmm.
In relation to both countries, the Jamaican would have no further tax in Jamaica on that stream of income.
Okay.
And in relation to deductions, the St. Lucia has a restriction in relation to how much management fees can be deducted before you arrive at the St. Lucia chargeable income.
I see.
And Barbados, on the other hand, doesn't allow any deductions for management fees paid to non-residents.
Oh.
And it's important to note that all companies are not equal in relation to receiving these type of streams out of St. Lucia or Barbados.
Yes.
The companies that were registered in Barbados or St. Lucia before the start of 2019 are actually grandfathered.
Yes.
And the effect of these laws will not actually hit them until July 1st, 2021. And that's really just around the corner.
Yes. What kind of tax planning tip you could want to provide for us today?
Clive, the Sygnus Tax 101 tip for today is that tax planning is not a service waiting for you like clothes on a display in a boutique.
Okay, rather like that example. It's not that, yes.
No, it's not that. When you go to a boutique and pick up a clothes off a suit off the shelf, it can either fit or it might not fit.
Yes.
Tax planning is rather like services personally tailored to meet your taste, your preferences, your unique shape and circumstance, and most importantly, to fit the current legislative landscape. Tax planning done right is fit for your purpose.
So to follow on that very good example, it's better to go to the tailors or to the dressmaker, in this instance, Sygnus, to see what it is, what can be put together that can be tailored to suit what is required given your circumstances.
Absolutely, Clive. And go to one that knows what they're doing.
Absolutely true. You don't want an ill-fitting suit, do you? Or how can we contact you?
You know, the Sygnus team, the Sygnus team has a real good mix of attorneys, accounting professionals, and tax specialists.
Yes.
I myself have over 31 years of experience in the business.
31 years? Are you sound so youthful? Not that you're not youthful. 31 years? Okay. Okay. It's interesting.
Clive, you're sounding youthful yourself. So probably I'm joining good company.
So how can we contact you at Sygnus?
Well, our team can be reached at telephone 634-5016 or 818-9883. By email, it's STA-team, that's STA-team at sygnusgroup.com. And you can reach us online at sygnusgroup.com.
Excellent.
We shall be so happy to address any of your queries or just to talk to you about any things you're considering.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, Denzil, I want to thank you so much, Mr. Denzil Whyte, Vice President and, of course, Managing Director of Sygnus Advisory Ltd. Yes. And what we call bespoke tailors for tax purposes. Just kidding. All the best to you. Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. That was Sygnus 101, Tax 101.
Tune in to Sygnus Tax 101 and stay in the know on tax planning opportunities for companies, finance managers, directors and entrepreneurs with tax expert Denzil Whyte, Vice President and Head of Tax Advisory at Sygnus Group during the Hotline on alternate Mondays at 10:15 a.m. That's Sygnus Tax 101, brought to you by Sygnus Tax Advisory Ltd, one of the Caribbean's leading full-service tax solutions firm, a member of the Sygnus Group of